My mom has been working towards getting back on that membership list for over 40 years.
Tonight, reaction from Kahnawake Mohawks affected by the Marry Out, Get Out membership law.
You claim that you're a matey, then I would rather tell you, why don't you claim that you're Mi'kmaq? And through your blood and through your connections and your lineage, prove to me that you're Mi'kmaq, and we'll decide if you're Mi'kmaq.
And we go deeper into the story of self-identified Acadian Métis and its impact on Mi'kmaq sovereignty. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. We begin tonight in Ottawa, where the long battle for equality for First Nations kids continues. The Canadian Human Rights Tribunal heard from Canada's witness on Jordan's Principle. Jordan's Principle is a Child First initiative that aims to ensure First Nations kids have access to all public services when they need them. Here's Annette Francis with that story.
The hearing started with an official acknowledgement by Tribunal Chairperson Sophie Marchaldon.
First of all, we want to acknowledge that this hearing is being held on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin people.
Then the Senior Deputy Minister of Indigenous Services, Sonny Perron, took the stand. He says access to the program improved over the last few years.
Jordan Principle focal points in the region are not authorized anymore to say no to cases, and any denial needs to be first reviewed by an ADM and HQ that have a mandate to verify and assess and challenge all these cases to make sure we haven't missed a point.
Perron was cross-examined Wednesday on Canada's compliance with Jordan's Principle. It's been 2 years since Canada was ordered to fully implement it by the tribunal. He says with the current changes in Indian status, it gets complicated, but measures are being taken.
You all know about S3, so which lead to a number of decisions that were made in the past in terms of who is registered and who is falling under 6.2 or 6. The different portion of the Act might change over time. So we have created a process to make sure we verify to make decision the best informed possible.
Child welfare advocate Cindy Blackstock says there are still concerns, but she has seen improvement.
When we look long term and we think about January 2016, they're now at least providing it across the broad spectrum of services we want. And 70,000 services have been provided, but we believe there are many more families out there who are still not aware of their eligibility for Jordan's Principle.
More witnesses are scheduled to be cross-examined over its compliance with Jordan's Principle next month. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Ottawa.
A Quebec court's recent ruling that Kahnawake membership law is unconstitutional continues to make waves. Skawanati Fragnito is a renowned Mohawk multimedia artist. She was also one of the plaintiffs that brought the lawsuit against the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake. Decades ago, her mother left Kahnawake due to its Marry Out, Get Out membership rule, which says community members must leave when they take a non-Indigenous spouse. After being awarded $1,000 in damages, she says the victory is bittersweet. She says no amount can pay for the fact that she wasn't raised in her own Mohawk community.
We never wanted to go to an outside court. We wanted this to be determined by our people, by Kahnawake. So it was because we've been doing this all of my life. My mom has been working towards getting back on that membership list for over 40 years. And, you know, we felt we had no more recourse. And the reason why we asked for damages is because money talks. We weren't even in it for the money. We wanted to send a message.
Kinder Morgan, the company behind the controversial Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, held their annual shareholder meeting today in Houston, Texas. There were also protests against the project in Texas and in BC. In Houston, First Nation leaders from British Columbia met with Kinder Morgan shareholders to explain why they're against the pipeline. Meanwhile, at the Kinder Morgan Marine Terminal in Burnaby, demonstrators blocked the gates on land and out on the water in kayaks to prevent employees from getting work done.
So they can't get any tankers in or out. They can't get any workers in and out as well. So what we're doing is we're costing them an entire day's work on the water and on the land, and we are also interrupting their AGM. So it's an international plan.
And we'll have more on the protests in Texas and BC on our newscast tomorrow. And In Focus is back with that topic of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Our guests discussed about how pipelines would help improve communities that run on the route, and others didn't agree.
And the whole dichotomy of pipeline safety versus transportation by trains is just industry propaganda. Okay, I have yet to hear a politician or a train company or a pipeline company say that if Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline is built, that they're not going to transport oil by rail. The reality of it is that the oil companies operating in Canada's tar sands want all the train capacity and all the pipelines that are on the table.
So, there's a lot of work going forward. But at the same sense, like Clayton said, there's a lot of socioeconomic problems in our communities. Water is still an issue. Healthcare is an issue. All the things that he said, and where are we supposed to get the funds to kind of combat those things? So, in our communities that produce oil and gas, that's what we do. We subsidize that lack of funding to try to tackle those problems. Education, maybe put up a youth center, maybe put up a hockey rink for the youth, and it's just, given the circumstances and the way things are kind of transpiring, everything that's going to happen out of this pipeline, it's going to set a lot of precedent.
We're going to have to make that radical change, and that's going to looking at ourselves as individuals and as leaders in our communities to create that change. And we have to take that courage right now. We're standing against great odds. Right now in our nation, we're standing against great odds, facing off against Canada and the Kinder Morgan pipeline. But we're willing to take that risk because the threat is way too much for us right now.
And you can watch the full episode of today's Live in Focus over at our website, aptnnews.ca. And we'd like to hear what you have to say about this or any other story. Here's how to contact us. Send an email to news@aptn.ca, like our APTN National News Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter @APTN News, or go to our website, aptnnews.ca. Many self-identified Métis say their claims of indigeneity are harmless, but others say it poses a serious threat. After the break, we'll continue our look at the proliferation of self-identified Acadian Métis. Here's a look at Thursday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. Cloudy and 13 in Fredericton and Charlottetown. Another snowy day in Inukjuak and -3. Snow and +8 in La Grande. A rainy day across much of Quebec. 23 is the high in Montreal and Quebec City. In southern Ontario, 18 in Windsor, Sarnia and London. Cooler in the northern part of the province. +6 in Wawa and Sioux Lookout. A sunny day in Churchill with a high of -3, +6 in Norway House. A sunny high of 10 in Winnipeg and Brandon. Over to Saskatchewan, and those 10s continue in Yorkton, Saskatoon, and North Battleford. +12 in Meadow Lake, La Ronge, and Buffalo Narrows. Welcome back. We've been taking a look at the proliferation of self-identified Acadian Métis in Nova Scotia. Tonight in Part 2, APTN's Justin Brake examines what their presence in Mi'kma'ki means for Mi'kmaq and Métis rights and sovereignty.
We don't have a problem with you guys or your hunt.
We're not making a living on this.
You do have a problem because you're here. We have a problem.
In December 2015, non-Aboriginal hunters protested a planned Indigenous moose hunt in Cape Breton Highlands National Park, arguing if the Mi'kmaq could hunt there, they should too. Alison Bernard of Eskazoni was there, and says a growing number of people outside his community are vying for resources on Mi'kmaq territory.
The majority of our population has to hunt and fish. So when you have other user groups claiming that they have that right to do so also, it doesn't sit well with me, and it doesn't sit well with the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia.
So we would like your commitment to stop the hunt.
One of the hunters who protested the Mi'kmaq hunt is Cape Breton resident Arnold de Turbid, who just a few months later was elected second chief and is a founding member of the Highlands Métis Nation. Some say the proliferation of self-identified Métis in Nova Scotia poses a serious threat.
So this is like a new wave of colonization, where the colonizers, who have already taken just about everything from us, have seen that we've received wins in courts over the last few decades. So now they're circling back, and the only way to defeat our wins, our claims to our lands and our resources, is to now claim Indigenous identity themselves and take it that way.
Many self-identified Métis say their claims of indigeneity are harmless.
We are who we are, and we've always been who we are. And is there a way that we can work this out in a spirit of, peace and brotherhood, as we were supposed to as Indigenous people?
Statistics Canada numbers indicate there were at least 27 times more self-identified Métis in Nova Scotia in 2016 than in 1996. St. Mary's University professor Daryl LaRue calls the phenomenon white settler revisionism, when self-identified Métis leaders self-indigenize based on a distant ancestor and encourage their memberships to follow suit in order to access Aboriginal rights.
The evidence that I've uncovered suggests that this is primarily a genealogical movement linked to political movement that often is organized around what one could easily call white supremacist ideas that are openly anti-Indigenous.
Not just hunting rights.
As far as I'm concerned, there are no Métis in Nova Scotia.
Fisherman and Sabaganagity First Nation councillor Alex MacDonald says Acadians who identify as Métis have also protested the Mi'kmaq fishery.
Fisheries, hunting, no matter whatever the issues are, right? They contest them, but yet they still claim to be Aboriginal.
We traveled to Sheddycamp, Cape Breton, home of the Highlands Métis. De Turbid wasn't home, and Chief Randy Roach declined an interview request.
I knew from way back, but you'd never talk about it.
But Roach's father, William, a local artist, was happy to talk.
It's a bloodline. It's a special thing to me, because, I'm getting on in age, and I'm glad to see that the young people are taking interest in finally developing that. They're gonna see where they come from.
Roach says his grandfather was of mixed French and Mi'kmaq ancestry. While his family has always identified as Acadian, he's genuinely interested in exploring his Indigenous heritage.
We would like to be identified as Mi'kmaq because that's what we are, But the Métis thing, for now, sort of covers it.
Jarvis Gugu of Waikogama First Nation has watched self-identify Acadian Métis in Nova Scotia grow exponentially.
I've never heard of any kind of collective Métis identity, culture, or language, or heritage in this region. It only just seemed to have popped up out of the blue in the early 2000s after Marshall.
The 1999 Supreme Court of Canada Marshall decision affirmed Mi'kmaq treaty rights to fish for a moderate livelihood.
So there are these moments where court decisions lead people to identify with a particular juridical or legal identity.
The 2003 Powley decision defined a Métis person as one who self-identifies, has an ancestral connection to a historic Métis community, and is accepted by that community.
Our victory, we said all along it was going to be real.
And in 2016, the Daniels decision ruled that Métis and non-status Indians are now the responsibility of the federal government and are classified as Indians under Section 91(2)(4) of the Constitution.
These precedent-setting legal cases would have looked very, very different had the Métis Nation Accord been passed.
Carleton University professor Jennifer Adese, who is Métis, said that turning point came in 1992.
It's time for Canadians to choose.
The Métis National Council had its own definition of a Métis person in the Métis Nation Accord, which was embedded in the failed Charlottetown Accord.
It's not until after that you start to see the emergence of all of these different organizations claiming Métis-ness.
Critics say those claiming Métis identity in Eastern Canada should carefully consider their actions.
But they should take the responsibility to be aware of the harms they're doing when they appropriate these identities for themselves.
In a climate in which Indigenous people have been so marginalized and debased in society, it is important for us to ask, are we making these claims in the most ethical way possible?
I mean, if you claim you're a Métis, then I would rather tell you, why don't you claim that you're Mi'kmaq? And through your blood and through your connections and your lineage, prove to me that you're Mi'kmaq, and we'll decide if you're Mi'kmaq.
Bernard says self-identified Métis are threatening Mi'kmaq resources.
It goes down to education, healthcare, resources, everything out there. It's slowly being squeezed by these new groups. So if these guys get some sort of allocation or some status from government and they get recognized, really, what does that mean?
So far, the Métis have yet to win a court case for rights here in the Atlantic, but Palmater says the Mi'kmaq Nation should be concerned.
And I worry that courts are not going to get the full picture if you have two non-native lawyers in court trying to make these arguments, say a Crown prosecutor and a non-native lawyer trying to make all of these Aboriginal rights claims for one of these opportunistic identifiers. That could be a real problem if we get a judgment.
Williamson says self-identified Métis in Nova Scotia also have treaty rights.
And those treaties did not delineate by blood quantum, generation, matriarchy, patriarchy, or anything else as to who the heirs of those treaty benefits would be. So in other words, the Mi'kmaq, the Acadian Métis, my people, anyone who descends from the nations that were signatories to those treaties, by rights, is a treaty beneficiary.
Mi'kmaq leaders didn't respond to an interview request for this story, but they've been clear in the past. The Mi'kmaq are the only rights holders here in Mi'kma'ki, and they should decide who belongs and who doesn't. Justin Brake, APTN National News, Halifax.
And to watch part 1 of this series, go to aptnnews.ca. That's where you'll also find Justin Brake's full write-up on the self-identified Acadian Métis. There's a move underway to ban large tankers on the northwest coast of British Columbia. That debate and more after the break. Here's a look at the rest of Thursday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta, 15 in Fort Chipewyan, Fort McMurray, and Peace River. Rain and 13 in Medicine Hat, soggy 16 in Lethbridge. On the west coast, 14 in Victoria, Vancouver, and Bella Coola, plus 15 in Prince George and Fort St. John. A warm day in the Yukon, 22 in Dawson City, 19 in Beaver Creek. A nice day in parts of NWT as well, 21 in Fort Liard, 19 in Fort Simpson. Still below zero to the north, -6 in Sax Harbor, -4 in Polituck. In Nunavut, -5 in Whale Cove, Repulse Bay, and Cambridge Bay. -8 on Thursday in Cape Dorset and Clyde River. Welcome back. The House of Commons has just approved a bill that would implement a ban on large tankers along the northwest coast of British Columbia. APTN's Tina House has a reaction from Vancouver.
The Hecate Strait is one of the roughest bodies of water along British Columbia's northwest coast. Bill C-48 would prevent any tanker carrying more than 12,500 metric tons of crude oil from transporting through these waters, from the northern tip of Vancouver Island to Alaska. The bill would also include no unloading of crude oil at ports or marine installations. West Coast environmental law lawyer Jessica Clogg says it's taken a long time to get here, and she applauds the new proposed law.
In 2010, coastal First Nations, a number of nations on the coast, banned crude oil tankers as a matter of Indigenous law from their territories, and they have been steadfast in their opposition because we know the harm caused to culture, to foods, to livelihoods, to really the ability to pass on one's culture to future generations from a potential oil spill.
Paul Correa is with Coastal First Nations. They led the fight to get the moratorium, and he's also pleased with the results.
Well, for us at Coastal First Nations, it was thrilling. I think it's been a long campaign, and to have that tanker ban passed in law through the House was really important.
However, not everyone is happy with the moratorium. The Lac Willam's Band launched a title case to stop the moratorium because they have plans to build a massive oil export facility in Prince Rupert, BC. And just a week ago, Mayor of the Lac Willam's Band told Prime Minister Trudeau, imposing an oil tanker moratorium is imposing on us more hardship without any consultation. But that legal battle could take a long time.
The legal proceedings filed by Lac Willam's are not the kind of thing that would present an actual legal obstacle to the ban. You might be looking at another decade before you start to see a result from that.
Bill C-48 still needs final approval from the Senate before it becomes law.
The bill does not answer all questions. It doesn't resolve Kinder Morgan. It doesn't resolve some of the issues with some things like the Nathan E. Stewart, but it's still very much cause to celebrate.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Springtime in the Yukon is a sure sign that miners are gearing up for another season. And 2018 is looking like it could be a golden year for the industry that has been collecting more dust than pay dirt. Over the years, low mineral prices and uncertainty with Yukon First Nations have put a dent in the once bustling mining industry. But in its spring economic outlook, Canada's Conference Board says Yukon is on the cusp of another mineral boom. Yukon Chamber of Mines says with the approval of 3 mines and the possibility of 2 more running within the next decade, things are looking golden for the territory.
This year's mining season is looking really good, and again, we're optimists. We're eternal optimists in this industry. We have to be, but not only that, we're also cautious because we realize that things can change at a moment's notice based on the world market. So right now, things are looking good, and we still have work to do. We'll continue to do that work on behalf of the membership, and yeah, it should be exciting times.
Well, that is your APTN National News for this Wednesday. For more news anytime, including today's In Focus, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Good form. Just like going to the gym. Could get hurt. Won't be hitting where he's hitting.